Hello, today I will be presenting a study by Katz, Moore, and Baker that examined whether embedded trials and systematic prompting could improve tactile and interverbal responses for elementary students with autism during reading instruction. Students with autism often struggle with functional communication and talking about academic content. Previous research showed that embedded instruction and systematic prompting are both evidence based practices when used separately. However, there wasn't much research on combining these two strategies during reading instruction, which is what this study wanted to examine. The purpose of the study was to see if combining embedded trials with systematic prompting would improve tactile and interverbal responses. The researchers also wanted to see if students would answer story questions more accurately and whether the intervention would be viewed positively by teachers, parents, and students. The participants were three elementary age students with autism. They were between the ages of 8 and 10 years old, received special education services, and all had delays in communication skills. The researchers used a single subject multiple probe design across participants. Each student first completed baseline sessions where questions were asked after the story was finished. Then they entered the intervention phase one at a time, followed by the maintenance probes to determine whether the skills continued after instruction ended. This design allowed the researchers to demonstrate a functional relationship between the intervention and improvements in responding. The intervention combined embedded trials with a system of least to most prompting. Instead of asking all questions until the end of the story, the teacher paused throughout the reading and asked questions as they progressed. If students answered incorrectly or did not respond, the teacher used a sequence of prompts, starting with gestural, then visual, and finally verbal prompts if necessary. Students also completed a preference assessment before each session and earned tokens for correct responses. The independent variable was a combination of embedded trials and systematic prompting. The researchers measured several dependent variables, including response accuracy, the number of prompts needed, the quality of students' story summaries, and social validity. They also looked at whether students became more independent over time. Overall, all three students improved after the intervention was introduced. Sam increased from 1 to or 2 correct responses during baseline to 5 correct responses during intervention. Sid improved from 0 to 2 correct responses during baseline to 4 during intervention. And Rachel also improved from 0 or 1 correct response to as many as 5. Another important finding was that the number of prompts needed decreased across sessions, suggesting that students became more independent. The researchers also measured social validity to see whether the intervention was meaningful and practical. Students responded positively. Parents agreed that the intervention supported communication and learning, and the teachers reported that she planned to continue using it after the study. This suggests that the intervention was not only effective, but also realistic for classroom use. The authors concluded that combining embedded trials and systematic prompting improved communication during academic instruction. One important implication is that communication skills can be taught during reading activities instead of being taught separately. This allows students to work on literacy and language skills at the same time. There were several limitations to the study. First, there were only 3 participants, so the results cannot be generalized to all students with autism. Second, the study was also conducted remotely during COVID-19, so researchers had less control over the students' environments. A strength of the study was that it was evidence based practices in a realistic educational setting. For future research, the authors recommended including more participants, conducting the intervention in face to face classrooms, and focusing on helping students generate more complex and original language rather than simply repeating information from the story. Overall, this study showed that embedded trials and systematic prompting can improve communication during academic instruction for students with ASD. Students answered more questions correctly, became more independent, and maintained many of their skills. While more research is needed, this intervention appears to be a practical strategy that teachers can use to support both communication and literacy. Thank you for your time. Bye.